to take your seats now as we begin our third panel discussion of Dayton Dialogue, Putting the Defense Industrial Base Back on Track, presented by the German Marshall Fund of the United States. And with that, I'm excited to invite our speakers to join us on stage for this discussion moderated by GMF President Alexandra de Hoop-Scheffer. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this session, which is pretty much in continuity with the two previous sessions we had this morning. I'm particularly happy to chair and moderate this conversation with three outstanding speakers today for the Dayton Dialogue. I strongly believe that transatlantic cooperation depends on the interactions between governments, industries, parliamentarians, but much more than that. It's also with citizens, civil society representatives, universities, just as this one, trade representative, innovators, entrepreneurs. And I think that's the only way we can preserve, and strengthen the transatlantic relationship as we navigate, Americans and Europeans, an increasingly complex domestic and global landscape. This is actually at the heart of what the German Marshall Fund is. This is really at the heart of the mandate I've been given myself as the recently appointed president of GMF, which is to rethink, reshape, innovate the transatlantic relationship so that it is fit for the 21st century challenges. And this spans cross-sector. It's security and defense, and this is the theme of this conference and of this session. It's also tech, it's also trade, but it's also rethinking the transatlantic alliance and shifting alliances in the world. And sometimes we're very, Euro-Atlantic, but sometimes we also need to rethink the way Americans and Europeans interact, engage with other powers, their Indo-Pacific allies, notably when facing some of the most critical challenges ahead of us. It's not only about challenges, it's also about opportunities. And I think this panel is also about talking about opportunities for deeper strategic cooperation in the industrial base sector. With that, I am delighted to briefly present you our three speakers from the military, government, industry sectors. First, Lieutenant General Andy Rowling, Deputy Chair of the NATO Military Committee, Marko Milkelson, Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Estonian Parliament, and to my right, Colonel Chris Coombs, President of Dayton Aerospace. So in the next hour, we will dive into the key challenges and opportunities for the transatlantic defense industrial base. Given the importance of Ohio in the defense manufacturing landscape of the United States, I could not think of a better place to hold this discussion. Particularly after the CEO perspective, which we've listened to, I look forward into diving into the discussion of how governments, how our industries, how our citizens can work together to revitalize the transatlantic industrial base and rise to this moment. Why is it critical to have this conversation? And it was noticeable that many in the questions that you have been raising in the Q&A sessions dealt with the industrial questions. Why? Because first and foremost, it is obvious that there is a need for Europeans to rearm in the light of the Russia's war in Ukraine. Europeans have stepped up. They've stepped up their defense budget, and we've been discussing the forthcoming NATO summit in June in The Hague, and there are some discussions on elevating even more this defense budget. There's also a need to recreate a robust industrial base, but this is still not done in a systematic and strategic way. And so how do we improve this? I think it goes through much more cross-sectoral transatlantic effort to enhance this. Number two, why is this important? Because there is a shifting, and we've discussed it, this really has been a structural shift in US foreign and defense policy and US posture in and with Europe. And there's a lot of questions, a lot of debate across this country, the United States, but also across European countries regarding the relevance, the importance of the Atlantic Alliance. And so there's a need also to resolve these issues of defense industrial competition between the US and Europe. And there is a need to revitalize industrial cooperation. Why? Because European and defense security is interconnected with Indo-Pacific, Middle Eastern security as well. And I think this is really something we want to be working on, is the intersections, the interconnectedness between the different security and defense issues. It's a global issue, and to make us more efficient in addressing these issues, transatlantic cooperation is critical. Third and lastly, and this is at the core of our conversation today, the defense industry will play a key role in societal resilience, in economic performance and prosperity in the years to come. I think we're over this old, boring debate of guns or butter. It's guns and butter, maybe guns a little less butter, but it's about really thinking of defense and the resilience of our defense as a key factor of our long-term societal resilience. And so I think it's important for you in the room, for us as strategic thinkers, industry, government, parliamentarians, to continuously articulate how important security is for our own democracies and societies. Now, with this in mind, I want to now turn to our speakers. I think we're all eager to hear their perspective. First, General Rowling. You have served all across the world in senior roles. And my first question to you is, where have you seen examples of progress in building a defense industrial base built for the current and future challenges we're facing? Where are the blueprints from which we can learn today?
Well, thanks, Alexandra. Thanks for the George Marshall Foundation for having me here today. And it's great to be here at the University of Dayton. My father graduated from this university a long time ago. I think more than anybody, he'd be shocked to see me sitting on the stage. But at any rate, to your question, I think I have to give a little context to how we got to some requirements. And so last week was the defense foreign minister, or the foreign minister's conversation in Antalya, Turkey, and where Secretary Rutte laid out kind of the foundation for where we're getting to go to in this upcoming summit in The Hague in June. And we're going to make the NATO stronger, more fair, and more lethal as an organization. And those are underpinned by NATO strategy that hasn't changed in the last several years. And for the first time since the Cold War, NATO developed a family of plans, the deterrence and defense of the North Atlantic Alliance, a family of plans that then drove regional plans where how we would defend the alliance, which then importantly drove what capabilities and capacity that each country of the alliance needs to produce. And so you have to know that we've developed the capabilities based on real plans that 32 nations have agreed to. So where can I show success in that? And as an Army guy, I hate to use this example, but the F-35 program is an example where we have, in some ways, shown that collectively we can overcome the obstacles. And the F-35, for those who know it, is designed originally in the United States with partners. It's built across many of our NATO allies. Italy does a large portion of the design and build of it. Many countries buy it. So if there's a way to help move to a capacity and capability that all NATO countries can do, there's a concrete example that's working today. The United States is working with a Turkish company in building an ammunition plant for what we're needing to do in the 155 millimeter artillery rounds, establishing a new plant between the two countries in Texas. And so, again, we can overcome these, and now's the time to do it.
Thank you. Where do you see the remaining obstacles? And how can we overcome there's still, at least in the European strategic debate, the perception that Americans say Europeans need to spend more, but need to spend more to continue to buy American.
Yeah.
And Europeans saying, hey, look, if you want Europeans to be a credible, more able, capable, better equipped partner and ally, then Europeans also need to produce more European. So where do you stand on that, and how can we overcome this sort of structural tension in the transatlantic conversations?
Yeah, sure. So I think what we need to do is change the paradigm a little bit to military cooperation and capacity building and less on economic competition. And right now I would argue that the balance between our countries is more on economic competition between allies and less on an agreement that we need collectively to build capability and capacity. When we change that around, and where countries will give and take a little on their own national economic requirements, to understand that you have to make some trade-offs to build real capacity and capability, we'll move forward. That's happening. From the United States perspective, you've seen a change to the Foreign Military Sales Program to help move that in a certain area. You see it on the EU side and the European side with the EU White Paper on Defense, where they're trying to acknowledge that the EU has real requirements that are real regulations that are impediments to capacity building, and making efforts that, together with requirements driven by NATO and capacity driven by the EU to produce it, coming together in a way they haven't in the past. So I think everybody acknowledges it. It will take us some unpleasant conversations, some unhappiness, but I think we're moving in the right direction, albeit slower than I, as a military guy, would appreciate. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Now moving to Europe and Estonia. Mr. Mikkelsen, Estonia is exemplary in terms of defense investments, but also societal resilience. Could you share, and in continuity with what General Rawling just mentioned, your insights on how the European defense industrial base can not only maintain itself, but also scale up? We've been discussing in the two previous panels about the problem of speed and timelines, right? We always think of European industrial project as a 20, 30, 40-year perspective, whereas we're obviously facing urgent security and defense threats. So how do you articulate the urgency, the short term, and the longer term need to invest in a stronger European industrial base? And if you could remind us, the figures of Estonian defense spending, because I think this is truly, an example.
Thank you, Alexandra, and good to be here. First time in Dayton, great place. I'm very positive, actually, and optimist. Where are we right now? Because time of empty words is over, and empty declarations. Because what is reality is that there is existential threat to all of us, not only to the countries like my country, Estonia, on eastern flank of NATO, but we know that what is real intent of aggressor state Russia is to destroy NATO. It's not only to annihilate the entire nation of Ukraine from political map, but also to destroy our security alliance, so defense alliance of NATO. So I see that on political level, and also within our assembly, NATO Parliamentary Assembly, which is starting its work tomorrow here in Dayton for spring session, there is a very strong unity and an understanding, a need also to speed up in terms of defense expenditures. You asked about numbers. This year in Estonia we spent roughly 3.5, 3.6% of GDP. But the jump up for the next year is enormous, actually. And this tells you that if you have strong political will and support of society behind it, you can do it. So from next year on, we will spend in Estonia 5.4% of GDP for defense without any tricks. And alone as us as a small nation, we have only 1.3 million people, but only next year we plan to spend around 3 billion, nearly 3 billion euros for all kind of procurements, both in terms of ammunition. For us, the highest priority is, of course, deep strike capabilities, but also air defense, multi-layer air defense, and a number of other areas. And as General said, 5.4% is not because somebody asks us to have that nice number, but this is exactly what we as allies have agreed upon. What kind of national level investments we need in order to meet those requirements which are written in NATO defense plans and other documents where we can act together as alliance and really deter the existential threat we have. But when I say that I'm optimistic, because really what has happened within Europe as well, not only the European Union, but in Europe's part of transatlantic alliance, is that we are at the doorsteps of real Zeitenwende, or a real turning point, because both the white paper, which was issued in March by Commissioner Kubilius and High Representative Kallas, and also the ideas which are presented there, both recognition of real lack of capacity and in certain capabilities when it comes, for instance, to air defense or deep strike capabilities, but also in modern technologies and future warfare like drones and other equipment which is needed, and what we see, what kind of environment we see in today's conventional warfare, what is day by day is going on in Europe, in Ukraine, and certainly also if there is a political will, and that is growing, and hopefully that will be highlighted during the Hague summit later in next month, in terms of pledging certain numbers, but also capabilities, then there is also the good direct avenue to the industrial base. The biggest problem we see today is a capacity of industry to meet actually requirements of nations, and we face quite a dramatic question how to acquire certain ammunition, for instance, for HIMARSes or for other platforms, because we are not happy to when somebody tells us that, okay, you'll get your rockets by 2035 or 2032. No, we need them now. And this is how we as allies, make sure that the industry gets that that huge amount of money is running into the markets right now, and how to really digest everything that will be in a way helpful for allies and nations to really bolster up its capabilities and deterrence measures.
Let me turn to you, Colonel Coombs. As someone with military government experience working directly with the industry, and Mr. Mikkelsen just alluded to the importance of political will. And so my question to you is really, where are the key areas where you see room of improvement in how governments interact with the defense industry? Sometimes there seems to be a misalignment. I think there is a shared diagnosis that there is urgency to step up in terms of production, etc. But then there is a sort of, industries looking at governments and saying governments are not really committed, and governments looking at industries and saying you don't produce fast enough. So how do we bridge this gap?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. As we look at industry, so my background, as you mentioned, did 30 years in the Air Force, ran programs that were also foreign military sales, like KC-46, Predator Reaper. As I look across industry, one of our biggest issues is being able to, as you've identified, getting the capacity, the production lines to the level that's necessary to be able to meet, whether it's your needs or even to replenish what we've seen we've lost through the Russian-Ukraine war. Some of the biggest limitations are our own policies. And what has changed, or what is changing, is as we get new treaties in place, as there are changes to the international trade and arms regulations, it allows us to go a little faster. From an industry perspective, and the folks that we've worked with, they look for capability, capacity, and talent as they reach out to external non-U.S. industry partners to be able to pick up the shortfalls that they may not be able to do. The limitations that get put upon them is what can be shared, and then how quickly can we share it. I know for some of the efforts that we've been involved with, as we look at different platforms, just to get through the State Department takes 9 months or greater to get the approval to move forward, to be able to help, say, either bringing capability that someone has that now we can leverage from the United States, or to transfer and be able to help externally. I think from the industry perspective, it's all led by, as you've mentioned, the requirements and the funding. Where are the requirements coming from, and then is there funding behind that? There is a move to, okay, how much can I lean forward? And if I do, what's the history behind me of how many times have I leaned forward thinking that I was supporting something and moving out quickly, and that never came. And so there's the balance there of where do we put our funding to be able to support the requirements that we all see but aren't coming necessarily into the industry.
A follow-up question on that is, you've mentioned a couple of obstacles here still that need to be dealt with. Is the strengthening of U.S.-European industrial cooperation, is that partially or substantially a solution to some of these obstacles, the speed, the production, etc., the acquisition, the production capacity? What do you see, as the president of the Dayton Aerospace, in terms of opportunities of cooperation between the both sides of the Atlantic? And if you could also, maybe mention some examples that already exist of some positive transatlantic industrial cooperation, I think that would be also helpful for our audience and the people listening to us.
I think from an industry perspective, there are a lot of European companies that set up their U.S. entity to be able to bring that technology, that knowledge, that capability into the environment, and likewise U.S. industries that are reaching out to be able to provide their support. I think one of the big initiatives that's being looked at, of course, as innovation continues to move so quickly, we can't go at the same speed that we've done in the past. One of the perfect examples of that is with advanced manufacturing. We have to find whoever has the best talent to be able to put that into play, to build the parts so, as you say, they can be able to produce the missiles that you want at a much faster pace. There's also limitations that come with that, and that is being able to review and understand what truly is the capability, meaning how sturdy is that, how long can I install that before it needs to be replaced. So the real true understanding of the manufacturing is important.
Thank you for that. General Rawling on that.
Yeah, thanks. So, in NATO, we put together a defense production action plan, and that defense production action plan was our way to, in about 7 different ways, to help speed along production. And the example, to your question of an example, would be how we've aggregated demand for a capability. In this case, I'll use Patriot as an example, and GEM-T, which is one of the munitions for Patriot. We aggregated demand amongst multiple NATO allies, and then in partnership with Raytheon and companies, Rheinmetall and others in Europe, built a production plant. Now it's soon to be broken ground in Bavaria, Germany, and that you have a European actual production with an American company with an aggregated demand across both sides of the ocean that's happening now that will help us, I think, move forward. That gives stability, predictability for your industry. It gives a cheaper price because we're all buying things together. It helps us with standardization because we're all using the same piece of equipment. It helps with interoperability because we're using the same tactics and techniques to employ it. And all that comes together for financial benefits for both European and American industry.
Thank you.
Yeah, when it comes to, for instance, Estonia, we have a very interesting sort of situation there. 20 years ago, basically, we didn't have our defense industry. Now we have more than 150 companies established who are trying mostly in an area of innovation and software engineering to be partners for international big companies, but also to really to use this in Estonia. We have a very strong startup mentality, so it's and the strong IT sector is a kind of good base for development in the area of UAVs or also battleground awareness systems, C2 capabilities, and so it's amazing to see how quickly actually this industrial base in Estonia is changing, and this is only one of examples what is happening right now across Alliance. And I think that what really pushes us to be more cooperative across Atlantic as well is a real need, because there is real threat, and we are running against time right now. And I would like to see much shorter timelines, as I mentioned earlier, because we don't have probably time to really be on the safe side till 2030 or 32 or so. So it's I really think that those real deterrence measures when it comes to conventional warfare they need to be in place as soon as possible. And for that, obviously, industry is pushed by politicians to make an effort.
So, Colonel Coombs, you mentioned, the war in Ukraine, and obviously we're still learning the lessons from this war in Ukraine. But where are the areas where we have failed? What has improved since then? And my follow-up question is how can European or NATO countries build up their stocks? Because suddenly we realized that we were running out of stocks. And you've mentioned munitions and all of that. And how do we prepare or make sure that NATO countries are ready, prepared, and equipped, not only for the current security and defense threat, but also for the future defense and security threats? Which leads me also, yes, the conventional dimension, which our armies had to relearn after more than 20 years of war against terrorism. So it has been a huge shift in terms of the military equipment, in terms of how we train our forces. But as we look also at the years to come, there's also now, the technological innovation. And so it's about being ready for many different types of threats and wars. And so how do we make sure we're preparing now, not just for today's threats, but also for tomorrow's threats from an industrial perspective?
Yeah, so from an industry perspective, I think it's important. We've seen changes that have occurred within the U.S. procurement through additional funding that's been provided, additional streamlined acquisition that we've been able to implement that allows us to quickly go to industry with new ideas, with new funding and requirements to start replenishing. The other part to that is then how do we start knowing where there is capability in other countries and start integrating that capability into systems that we have. When I take a look at weapons, that's not an easy process to be able to take a foreign-made
weapon or bomb and integrate that onto an aircraft. There's a whole process. It's the same process that we go through for any new weapon system that we're putting onto an aircraft. But we have to go through that, and that is time. Unfortunately, as you've identified, we don't have a lot of it, so how do we go faster? But getting that through, looking at organizations for the Air Force like Seek Eagle, making sure it can safely separate from an aircraft. It's those kinds of things of identifying, and it's really both industry and leaders looking out there through their different lenses of what are they seeing as the threats, and then looking across the board of what capabilities are out there. When you look at the Russia-Ukraine war, we've all learned a lot just looking at that of it doesn't take, you know, the most exquisite kind of development to be able to make it a powerful weapon. We have to think of those things too, of what is it that we really want to apply and be able to develop them and produce them and give them to the warfighter quickly. I think back to World War II, when back, you know, we started transforming industries that were not prone to be in the defense industry, such as the Ford company. You know, we got them up to delivering B-24s, I think it was one a day. That capability we have to be prepared for, and how do we do that? How do we look at those non-defense kinds of companies and be able to bring them into the fold? It's harder today because all of our systems are so highly exquisite. Yes, thank you. And bring in technology that it's not easy just to reach out to anybody to, hey, I need you to produce this part. And so it takes that time of training. What the Air Force has done and what we're seeing across DoD with digital acquisition and what we are doing now in those kinds of environments allow us to quickly review, quickly integrate new capability, and share with whoever our partners are.
Alexander, if I could kind of jump a little on, and I think as Chris was laying out, I think we have to help reshape our approach, industrial approach, and our military approach in a way that we have to balance, as the military would call it, a major end item. So an airplane, you're not going to develop a new airplane overnight. That's going to take some time. You're not going to develop and build a new tank overnight. That's going to take some time. And then you balance that against innovative technology, and drones being the latest great example, that if your entire production line is based on a model of drone with a capability that exists today, you will be outdated by tomorrow. So how do you help industry build a balance between a major end item requirement and an innovative capability that allows them flexibility? And so we shouldn't build a tank or an airplane anymore that can't do software upgrades that allow innovation to happen, and nor should the capability requirement be such that we ask for a tank today and ask for an entire new tank tomorrow. So we have to balance those two between, and right now we're struggling in a little bit of that shift from and I'm not speaking against any defense prime, any of these major defense industries that are really set on the way of capability development, capability production, capability funding and fielding, which takes years and is not a flexible approach. And how do we bring in, as Mr. Mickelson was saying, new emerging technology that today is a really great capability, but tomorrow that capability can completely change, has to get produced, and can get done by the same company that produced it yesterday. So we're a little out of balance, and I think we need to get in balance, and there's a lot of great companies that are moving in that direction.
Thank you, Mr. Mickelson.
Yes, I think if we want to make alliances, industrial base and innovative edge even more stronger and more kind of capable, we have to invite Ukraine as soon as possible to become a member of NATO. And hopefully this will happen sooner than later. This is just amazing to see on the front lines. I have visited several times those units, the drone units on the front lines. As you know, currently 80–85% all of casualties right now is caused by drone warfare in Ukraine. So it's there. If you go to one unit, which is just battalion size drone unit, their kind of places are like mini laboratories. that they're fighting 24/7 against the innovation of enemy. And this is, as you said, General, you know, if we keep going with the same mentality and approach as we used to be during peacetime, then we will lose the edge to the enemy. And so this is one very important lesson what we learned from Ukraine is that decentralization is something what helps actually to achieve better results. And today, as I'm not mistaken, in Ukraine there are more than 1,000 companies who produce all kind of different elements for drones. And I think what the European white paper is addressing the importance of cooperation of defense industry, both from the United States and Europe as well, with Ukrainians to build joint ventures and to actually produce in Ukraine.
If I could stay with you, Mr. Mikkelsen, on this articulation for European countries between investing more in the European industrial base while articulating with the transatlantic industrial cooperation. Because, again, one of the lessons learned of the war in Ukraine is that Europeans discovered they had huge gaps, huge capability gaps that needs to be filled. And Estonia has been really at the forefront of this conversation of needing to produce more ammunitions and do joint pooling, joint financing, etc. How do you articulate this? Because there are gaps now. At the same time, there's need to invest more in the European defense industrial base for the future. So how do we find a way of working in a constructive way as allies now, because there are gaps to fill?
Definitely there is one of the obstacles is protectionism and unnecessary protectionism. At the moment, I see what has happened positive lately is the EU and the UK signed a kind of common declaration in terms of how to enhance cooperation in the field of foreign security, defense policies. And this is exactly what, for us as a small nation and on a borderline, an ally, a very committed ally, is that we don't want to see those unnecessary borderlines between allies. We understand that there is competition, there is protection of certain intellectual rights and so, but when it comes to again to the common interests, and which is really to get ready as soon as possible with all those gaps what we have filled and keep a kind of green light for innovation from wherever it comes from to defense industry. And this is the common win for all of us. We argue in Estonia and among allies that we have to be more transparent, we have to be more open, and that makes us more competitive as well, end of the day, in this world. So.
Colonel Coombs on that?
Yeah, I agree with you that we need to be more transparent. We need to be able to share information faster. The limitations go back to they're set by governments. And those regulations that we follow have been established, whether it's from the U.S. or any other country. It's getting through that process and being able to understand the capabilities that we can quickly provide to meet the requirement to be able to protect any of our members of NATO. And then how can, from the other side, whether it's a technology that you all have that can be brought into our capabilities, into our platforms, whether it's the F-35 or a tank or whatever the case may be. We want to be able to provide as quickly as possible. And so from the industry perspective that I deal with, they look for I go back to the capability, the capacity, and the talent. The fourth one is the innovation and understanding everything that is quickly changing. How do we quickly bring that in? It's not an easy process to do, having done that on multiple platforms. where we were responding. I'll take you back to my times in Predator Reaper. We were responding to changes in the battlefield every day. You brought up the software changes. To be able to get that software out, had to go through a rigorous process, and it was needed yesterday. I had to be able to get the tech orders set. It was needed yesterday so that people could be able to operate, maintain those aircraft. It's looking at all of those things. Now, how do we move it quicker using the capabilities that are coming about? Artificial intelligence, how does that help us? How does that give us that edge to be able to provide that capability? Industry plays in all of those things, and it's, which horse do you ride today to be able to deliver the right capabilities?
General, on that?
No, I mean, I think we've said much on there. I think there's a lot of opportunities. The ability to innovate and innovate fast and innovate in scale is where we're having to retool our systems. And I think we're seeing that on both sides of the Atlantic. And there's a lot of efforts at NATO itself to smooth out the things that are causing the disruption. The inter-EU to NATO issues, the inter-NATO alliance issues, and the inter-Europe issues. So I think we're in a good space. It's continuing to effort and a lot of focus to get there.
Yeah, well, thank you. Before opening up to question, I had the last question to the panel, which is, we've been talking about governments, industries. What if there is one quick win, that could help fill some of these potential gaps in the months or 2 to 3 years to come? What would it be, and what should governments/industries on both sides of the Atlantic be prioritizing right now? Maybe Mr. Wilkinson.
Yeah, I think we have to identify those obstacles on national level, which slow us down. And in Estonia, for instance, we are right now going through to refresh legislation in a way that there is no sort of artificial, if I may say so, obstacles to get industrial base ready, let's say, for production. We are just establishing our own defense production area, completely brand new, and ask investors to come in to invest for different kind of production lines. But there are environmental requirements, the planning, the other process, which is normal for sort of times when there is no existential threat on horizon. So this is number one. But secondly, also cross-border issues as well, military mobility issues, but also you mentioned the FMS. This is something what we from Estonia also, our procurement office has been dealt with, and that is something what slows down, let's say, procurement, what is highly necessary for us. But again, recognition of those obstacles is on national level is critically important.
I agree wholeheartedly. It's the getting together and identifying those obstacles and then attacking them one by one of how do we break down those barriers. You mentioned the foreign military sales. That provides one avenue. The other one that I mentioned previously was dealing with ITAR. How do we change those regulations? And it's through a true understanding of the agreements that are made either between countries, between organizations, NATO, and others, that we can then leverage to be able to produce and deliver a capability faster.
Yeah, we've kind of said most of them, and I'll just, in quick summation, I think, we've talked about reducing trade barriers, and so if we're on the path to do that. We've talked about export and technical control reductions between the United States and others. I think that's right. We've talked about reducing the foreign military sales restrictions. I think we're on track to do that. We've talked about changing the mindset from both businesses and from the governments on how to invest. And then lastly, we've talked about changing from economic competition to military capability. And we're at a time right now that we haven't seen really since well before the end of the Cold War, where for the first time we have more money than we have the ability to actually use that money in capacity. The United States is, if the bill goes through, we'll have close to a $1 trillion defense budget. The EU countries alone have put together well over 800 billion euro, which in today's exchange rate is well over $1 trillion. So together, there's more money out there than there's the ability to actually produce and the capability to get there. So I think we've got to resolve those issues so that we can use this money wisely, and the time is now to do it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm happy to open the floor to questions. So I'll take a group of questions. Difficult to see you, so I'll try Erwan here, and then on the right. Please, Erwan, in the second row.
Thank you, Alexandra. Unpacking something that I think you only just touched on, but that I think deserves more explanation in greater detail. Russia is pretending that it doesn't have to, Putin is pretending that it doesn't have to turn his economy into a full all-out war footing, and he's killing his economy by doing so. The Europeans, those of us who don't face the immediate existential threat, what would be your advice to European politicians as to what should we aim for as societies if it's not moving entirely to a war footing? What's the sweet spot that would make for a solid social compact among NATO allies as to what exactly we're asking our economies to shift towards? And along those lines, any advice as to, are you happy with the extent to which, for instance, the European Investment Bank has now watered down its restrictions on funding for the military? We're seeing British-EU efforts on a new defense bank, but there still remains sort of this hesitation. If you look at pension funds, for instance, into investing in military ventures, it seems to me there's this profound shift in the mindset and in the social compact of our societies in order to get the funding where it needs to be, even though I take the point that we have more money than we know what to do with. Thanks.
Thank you. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Alexandra. Tomáš Valášek, Member of Parliament from Slovakia. Excellent panel, thank you, all three. Help me understand or resolve an apparent contradiction between what General Rowling and Colonel Coombs said. We heard from the General right here at the very end of the panel that for the first time we have more money than the industrial capability to deliver the weapons we want to buy for the money. But equally we heard right at the very beginning of the panel an understandable concern from Colonel Coombs that in the past industry was willing to invest into new capabilities, expanding production lines on the assumption that there will be, the government is serious about the orders and the money, but it hasn't always happened. And I understand you have a responsibility to your shareholders. You don't want to spend money on expanding production lines to deliver things that are in the end never ordered. But given that we heard again that the money is there, how come the industry isn't matching the money? And how do we get from a situation that the industry recognizes the need to expand? It says it is willing to do so. We hear the government has all the money, the industry wants and more, and yet here we are, year 3 of the war against Ukraine, with Russia producing about 1.5 times the artillery shells they were capable of producing. So clearly something has gone wrong. Help me understand what and how to fix it.
Thank you. It's nice to see you, Thomas. So let's start with you, Colonel Coombs.
So I think from the industry perspective, as I mentioned in the beginning, yeah, there is a little bit of concern of, okay, how far out do I move? While there's the funding, the other hand to that is the requirements and the direction that's given to us by our government and through other requests that come in to the government and into industry to produce. It's one thing to go out and start producing. I have to be concerned with how much of a stockpile I have and be able to meet who is the requirement for, who do I need to deliver that capability. So you'll see some of the industries, I think, move out based on they know that they've always been funded, or they're top of the line based on the shortfalls in the different stockpiles. But it's a twofold thing. One, the money, and two, the requirements. And so what they then push for when they know that there's funding, every industry representative, every company is up there trying to get a piece of that and go, look, I've got a capability I can provide. Is this something that you're going to need? Is it you want more aircraft, you want more tanks, you want more weapons, or some other kind of capability that you need to be able to defend yourself? So the good thing is that the money's coming. We're seeing that. Now we need to make sure that the requirements are flowing just as quickly.
And I think there's a follow-on that's going to happen. You'll see out of the Hague Summit in the next few months, which is countries formally accepting their capability targets that are designed out of the defense planning process. And so right now it's been a bit in the negotiation side. There's a fair amount that's been floating around on the public space on what are those capability targets. But to Chris's point, I think now we're going to be able to come back to countries and say, okay, you country of 30 of the 32, you agreed that you were going to invest in this capability. You've committed the funds against it. So now we have a committed capability against committed funds. Now it's time to produce. And so I think we're in that process. It's just not going nearly as fast as I think many of us hope to do. And then I think the next part of that is many of the things we're talking about are inherently inefficient and non-cost effective. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but when you build a bunch of 155 artillery rounds and the desire to build them is to save them for the rainy day, there's a little bit of what's my immediate return on investment of if I put €1 billion into 155 rounds and what do you show for it? A big pile of ammunition. Yes, as a military guy, I like big piles of ammunition, but that's a little bit harder to show back to your conversation about bullets and butter. We have a requirement for those rounds. It's hard sometimes to explain to folks why that's important, and I think we got to help them do that.
And to add on to that, what's the balance of how much do I stockpile and have extra of that? Could I have used some of that money to innovate and move to the next capability?
But at the same time, we have a full-scale war going on in Europe, what we haven't seen since the end of World War II, and we need constantly, day by day, ammunition. If you go, you meet your Ukrainian commanders, what they ask you, they don't need ceasefire or peace without victory. They need for victory. They need ammunition. They need weaponry, and there is constant still lack of 155s or so. And as Thomas mentioned, and Rutte, I guess today or yesterday mentioned this also, that Russia still is producing 4 times more ammunition at the moment than we as allies altogether annually. So, and their plans, if you ask that there are kind of different understanding perhaps in some NATO allies that perhaps we in Estonia and others like Finland and Poland and other Baltic states understand how existential the threat is, but I think that we could make quite a serious mistake if people in France or Spain or Italy or UK would think differently, because Russia is aiming right now for all-out war against NATO, not only against some neighboring nations.
I have 3 hands raised. I'll start here on the right, in the middle, and then on the left, please.
Yeah, thank you, Alexander. Is it work? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm Ron Nolkers. I'm from the Netherlands, and of course we're looking forward to the Hague Summit next month. We know that there are a lot of barriers, and the General addressed them, a couple of them, and these are barriers that have to be solved in cooperation between government and industry, but there are also barriers amongst industries between Europe and US. And I think we can be grateful, for example, the Netherlands with the Marshall help after World War II, we could build up our own industries. But what do we now see? If an SME, if a small company wants to cooperate with one of the OEMs in the US, it's gone with their intellectual property, because US companies require the ownership of IPR, or intellectual property rights. So, Colonel Combs, perhaps you could elaborate a little bit on that. Is there a change in policy, if possible, within industries in the US to change that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think there was a question in the middle right here, and then on the left. Or maybe, yeah, because you have the mic, go ahead.
Yes, hello. My name is George Olson. I work for a charitable NGO My question is about the political will. It seems that in order to maintain a robust defense industrial base and to rebuild it, you have to have very strong political will. And in particular, in Europe, I'm thinking about what you just said about Spain and France. I mean, when did Russia ever invade Spain? And how are we trying to convince the Spaniards or the French that this really is necessary, assuming that there are people in those regions that don't share the same concern that people closer to Russia, like in Poland and Germany and in Estonia, might feel? Or have surveys been done to indicate that they actually do see the need? I don't know. So that's my question.
Thank you very much. And then a third question or comment on the left, and then I'll get back here.
Hello, my name is Tony Bishop. I'm a current Marshall Memorial Fellow, actually. So,
Hello,
hi.
welcome.
Yeah, and I'm from Dayton, Ohio.
Great.
So my question is, with the unprecedented amount of funding being put into defense spending globally, is there any focus on using some of this money to innovate and begin to close the interoperability gaps that currently exist within the NATO alliance?
All three easy and interesting questions. We're very lucky. Thank you very much. Let me start with you, General.
Well, okay, thanks. First, I'll start with Tony's question at the end, if I will. So yes, on the NATO side, there is opportunities and ways that we're working on the innovation gap. And I'm going to end up throwing a bunch of NATO acronyms at you, but I'm trying to, if I can remember what they stand for, then I'll explain them. But the first is the NATO Innovation Fund, the NIF. This is a fund using collective funding, meaning all 32 nations have agreed to put money together, and we've dedicated money for small companies and innovative ideas, and that how do we take the capability NATO sees and help move forward that innovative idea to a product that works into the future. And that develops into the next, and unfortunately I'm not going to be able to explain to you the acronym because I can't remember it, but Diana. And really Diana, and the D is defense, I can guarantee that. But the rest of it is how do you take that innovative idea and now move it into a company and fund it through common funding so one is the innovative fund for an item, the second is innovation for a company, and move that collectively through. And that's NATO. That's outside of what countries are doing individually by 32, but that's the one. And then if I could, to your question real quick, George, on how do we explain to countries why it's important. We explained to countries because they signed up to be part of NATO. They expected that in Article 5 that if it wasn't Russia attacked, then it would be some other requirement, and they're part of helping to build a capacity for NATO in the current scenario with Russia is the ability of NATO to respond at a given time. And I'll remind everybody that Article 5 has only been induced once in NATO's history, and that was not induced on an attack by Russia. That was induced on an attack against the United States on 9/11, and our NATO allies came to our share. So I think you got to think of NATO in a lot broader sense than just Russia. It's the defense of the alliance, 32 nations in the alliance that came together and said, we will stand together. And so each country needs to do its part, and whether it's Russia or anything else, it's time to pony up.
Thank you. Please.
Yeah, perhaps on political will as well, and understanding what are those threats which are actually commonly important for all of the allies. Doesn't matter the size of a country or where the geographic location is. I very much liked what Mr. Merz said, I guess today in Lithuania. You know that Germans have dedicated full brigade permanently stationed in Lithuania, and he said again that the defense and the independence of Lithuania is as much important for Lithuanians as for Germans. So we have in the Baltic states, in Poland, in other eastern flank countries of NATO right now, nearly all NATO allies present with different kind of tools and capabilities. Currently in Estonia, we have a air police policing provided by Portugal. F-16s are flying. They had a nice interaction with Russians just the other day. They get good training there. So and understanding. If I meet pilots, they tell all fingers up that this is the best place to really be in really good training process as well, and with real let's let's say, issues which matter for alliance. So this is, I don't think that this is today as difficult to explain as probably was 5 or 10 years ago. But as the General mentioned, Russia is not the only threat to all of us. There are a number of other strategic challenges, including also China and some others. So, and the threats are coming from both from east and south as well. So it's Estonia, we recognized together with allies that the Northern Africa is something that can be, if this destabilized, can be very serious threat for us. This is why we had a missions both in Mali, in Central African Republic, and some other places, including also currently in the Middle East.
Please, General.
I think from the industry perspective, interoperability is extremely important. We look at who we're going to be partnered with, who we are teaming with to be able to go up against any conflict. But it goes back to the requirements that are flowed down to whatever the communication system is, those weapon systems, be able to integrate through the different partnerships that we have with whether it's F-35 or other FMS. We ensure that interoperability, but there's a lot more based on the package that's put forward to respond to any kind of conflict. Going back to your question on IP and how do we lower that barrier, I think it goes back to what we said of we have to identify those different areas and that are causing us from not being able to deliver capability quickly. In that case, the IP dealing with U.S. industries, and it really comes back down to we have to be able to sit down and figure out what's the right mechanism to be able to protect not only from the foreign entity, but also from U.S. industry. But it really comes down to that agreement, those identification of the barrier, and how do we move from that.
If I could add something on the political leadership, I think it was your question, which I think is absolutely critical. GMF has been polling year after year around 13 European countries, Canada, the United States, and Turkey, including on Ukraine. There is still a strong support, but I think you're right. There is an issue with how political leaders convey the urgency of the situation and why this is not just a Ukraine piece, but it's a whole of regional cross-sectorial security issue. You see that because it's not just a European security issue, it is an issue of global security because of what I said in the intro, the intersections between the geographies, having North Korean troops helping Russia today in the war is very significant. Having South Korea becoming a significant arms, munitions, you name it, exporter to Europe, Poland, and other countries is significant as well. Having the Iran-Russia connection as well. So it's like, we used to say a couple of years ago in the NATO context, you had the eastern and the southern flank. That truly doesn't make sense anymore because of the intersections between the eastern and southern flank. And I think, one who conveys that really well is NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who wrote, I think on the day of Trump's re-election, an op-ed, can't remember, I think it was Politico, where he was really framing Ukraine as an issue not only of European security, but global security. And so if we Americans, Europeans show weakness in Ukraine and in Europe, we're showing weakness vis-a-vis other rivals and allies. And we are killing our credibility and NATO's credibility as well. So my question, to a political leader today would be what legacy do you want to leave to the future generation? What is the legacy here? I think it's very important to challenge a leader and tell him, what do you want to leave to your kids or to your grandchildren? Do you want to leave, a European continent that is in permanent instability and security? Or do you want to preserve the stability of the European continent, which, by the way, is at the heart of American strategic interests? So I think that's a way also of convincing publics here in the United States and across Europe is to reconnect these issues that seem far away, but in fact they're not far away. They're very, very close to our societal, industrial, political, and human security interests. I have time for a couple of other questions, if there are. I'm really sorry because I cannot see you very well. Yes, please, here on the right. Is there anybody else? Could you raise your hand really high? Please.
Parkanash, thank you so much. Very interesting discussion thus far. Alexander, somewhat on how you left off in terms of these connections. I feel like that, especially Russia's war against Ukraine felt very salient in the beginning. Across the United States, you felt people feel it, discuss it, and people responded, whether it was companies, others. I'm wondering what the panelists think about where we need to focus and move forward and where to draw people's attention. Is it cooperation, at the industrial level on forward production? Do we need more closer to where it's needed? How can we, better integrate some of these small, medium-sized firms like across the Midwest, others, so that there is a true transatlantic through line that makes the alliance a bit more real for people, their jobs, etc.?
Excellent question. Anybody else? Is there? Yes, please, here in front. Oh, sorry, please.
I defer.
Okay. It's so difficult to see you.
Please, ma'am. I only ask
And here as well.
there's no one else.
Here, please.
Okay, Cheryl Gallant, Member of Parliament from Canada. So this 155 millimeter shell issue, when we ask industry, what is the holdup? Why can you not manufacture it? Quite apart from tooling up, it is, we need the contracts. So we know that there is the Czech program underway, and which is being very successful. But what is it about the contracts? Is there a reluctance, or why is there a reluctance on the part of governments or NATO to actually place these orders?
Thank you. Yes, please, sir. And then I'll move here.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm not preempting anyone. My name is Edward Joseph with Johns Hopkins SAIS. I'm an Army veteran, also in the Balkans, in Bosnia. I served with I4, with NATO in I4. And this is a fascinating panel, fascinating discussion. It just strikes me, and I think you're doing it exactly right, but to bring this issue here in Ohio and demonstrate to people how connected the mission is of the alliance to the home front. And my question is, I'm just baffled that why more of this isn't done. It just strikes me that it would be in the interest to demonstrate to, for example, in the U.S., now where unfortunately this debate has arisen about even whose side we're on, or the importance of the standing up with Ukrainians. Is there any way that perhaps industry itself could help make the case that this is beneficial to the American citizen? And it's not just we're, giving all this away, meanwhile, as Ukrainians are fighting and dying for their country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And then last question here.
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. It's fascinating to learn about all of these different things. As we talk about capacity and capability, a formidable adversary will understand what our gaps are. So I'm very curious if any of you are thinking about how China and Russia, North Korea, all these different countries are working together and anticipating what their reaction is to what we're doing here right now. And if you could speak to that. I think you spoke a little bit about the different intersections, but specifically, what are you seeing right now within the next 5 to 10 years, and what are we doing about that? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Nicholson, let's start with you.
Yeah, comment a couple of questions, perhaps starting from the last one. If I could be Putin or Xi, but specifically Putin, because I think I a little bit understanding as Estonian, understanding their mentality. I used to be also a journalist in Moscow mid-90s and covered their war against Chechnya. I think that we are running against the time right now. They might be pretty stupid to wait till we are ready. So I think that we have to shorten our timelines significantly. And it doesn't help in all those guesses what we had today that Russia is ready in 2027 or 2030 or 32. We are ready right now. They have 1 million people actually under their arms, and yes, you could argue what kind of quality it is, but they're learning constantly on tactical level, operational level, and also innovating on not only in the area of drones, but and I think that we have to be ready today with everything what we have, and what is most important perhaps is that we are focused primarily on conventional warfare. But don't forget that the key element for NATO has been always nuclear deterrence. And this is something what I would like to see highlighted today and in near future much more seriously than we have done so far, because probably Putin understands that that maybe nuclear deterrence doesn't work anymore as it used to be. And maybe there is a chance to test us on conventional level. This is why I argue that we should not underestimate their readiness much sooner. This is what we see, what they do on our borders, how do they regroup the units, and how to make divisions to corps, attack divisions to corps, and multiplying their capabilities in Leningrad military district against Finland and us, we have to be very serious about. But, and last but not least, about leadership and political will as well. I think, again, I've been in Parliament now more than 20 years, and I've never seen, again, this kind of unity and strong understanding of those threats what we as allies have. So I am positive. And there is a group of countries within alliance who make really our voices more stronger known, even if we are not as big as some others. So it's Nordic-Baltic area is very, very dynamic and very like-minded together with Poland. So it's I'm optimistic that we are going and getting from The Hague, if what it is the immediate sort of timeline, best possible results. But at the same time, we should not also make any excuses not to talk about Ukraine, not to talk about Russia and real threats.
Cool, no, Coombs, and then I'll finish with you, General.
So I'll go back to the how do we get small business out in the center of the country more involved. There are lots of different conferences that industry goes to looking for new capability, that additional capacity to better understand what they can bring to the fight. As you look at the importance of NATO, it's really getting out to the different communities and being able to show the importance of what NATO brings to us, what we can be able to do to support them, and how what we deliver to NATO can help provide the defense and be able to support or the deterrence to what goes on in Europe. And then as far as industry looking at other countries and what they're doing, with all of the capabilities that industry invests in and starts building, they look at what is the counter capability and how do I counter that. So they're always looking at what other countries are doing that could affect whatever system they're delivering.
Thanks, and I know we're almost out of time here, so I'll summate in this way. First of all, I think for the collective, you should be confident that NATO has the right leadership in place. And I mean that by 32 leaders and the Secretary General. So collectively, we have the right leadership and they're committed to NATO. All 32 nations are committed to NATO. We have the right plans put together that will help us for our deterrence and defense of the North Atlantic area. We have the right capability or the right plans to do it. Their capabilities are identified. The nations are finally accepting their capability targets. It's coming together. And mostly for my American friends that are on the backside of this organization here, I would say you should be confident in NATO as an alliance. You should be confident in the United States' role in NATO, that we are a strong alliance, we remain a strong alliance, and we will remain stronger together. So thanks for that participation.
Thank you. I just want to close up with one of your important question, which is, we're bringing this conversation here to Dayton, Ohio. And I'm committed as the president of the German Marshall Fund to bring this conversation much more outside of the Washington bubble. We've been doing it a lot on Ukraine these past 3 years, but it's not an elite conversation. And in fact, there is now an intersection, a blurring line between the domestic and the foreign policy issues. For the United States, China is both a domestic and a foreign policy issue. Climate change is the same. Ukraine as well, because it's not only the future of Europe, but it's the future of the transatlantic relationship and global security and stability. So I think that's something we'll be doing. I'm happy we have a Marshall Memorial Fellow, someone who has been benefiting from one of our flagship exchange program. We're bringing American citizens to Europe during 3 weeks and vice versa, European citizens across the United States for 3 weeks as well. And I think that these exchanges, people-to-people exchange, are absolutely critical today. So yeah, that's my hope here. But thank you all very much. This was a fascinating panel. Please join me in thanking our speakers. And I wish you wonderful and insightful days to come in Dayton, Ohio. So see you all very, very soon. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much.